I'm eating crunchy grapes. They have seeds. And I'm coloring my hair with beet. This is a little test spot to see what happens. I'm going to leave it for about an hour and see. The pink hair beet juice experiment didn't work, so whatever. And last night and the night before, I used my Spunk or Himalayan acupressure mat before I went to bed, and both nights I didn't wake up to pee, and I usually do. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I'll try it again tonight. I had a good sleep for sure. And today I'm feeling a little, not sure. And I just downloaded iOS 11, and I'm parked here, and a screen came on saying, we just detected you might be driving. Well, I was driving 5 minutes ago. And it said, do you want us to turn on Do Not Disturb? Well, that was pretty disturbing to do that when I'm not even driving. So we'll see what little things are to learn on iOS 11. So this blah feeling feels like having access to very few epi gestures, less clarity on what to do next. This park closes in half an hour, so maybe I will go to a store and try to get a pair of shoes that's suitable for this kind of weather. And maybe after that I'll go home and work on putting the private audio videos on my blog. And I have those snacks. Yay. Happy October. It's October 1st, and today is the day I marked in my calendar as the longest I've gone since the major crisis I had in January. So that's a pretty big milestone. So every day after this will be the longest I've gone. Though I did have some more crisis stuff come up in March. But it didn't get bad because I nipped it in the bud with antipsychotics at the time. And then I went on the journey of tapering off all medications and have been off all medications for 17 weeks. And I'm in my favorite magical forest. And it looks extra magical. This says it all. They talk about tree hugging. There's 3 trees hugging. And I don't feel like I have a lot of words right now. I'm not sure what that's all about. I think it's a biorhythm of sorts. I feel like I'm having quite a lot of subtle intimations of insights, but I haven't been writing them down, really. I've been writing down some stuff related to what I want to create, but not the insights, because I'm not making it a practice of writing insights down and talking about them like I was. So I'm wondering if that voice is atrophying because I'm not participating with that process. I'm not sure. I do want to get to a place where I can speak insights and not need to write them down and talk about them later. And I was looking at some of the ones that I never did get a chance to say, because it would take quite a few hours to say them all on video and edit it and everything. And maybe I'll make that into something else, because there was a progression there somehow, and I'm wondering about that. For example, I had this subtle sense of the words how to. Whenever one asks how to, change the word how to now. Because now is the only moment that we can do anything, but if we think how to, it's delaying doing, acting, which is part of the moment. So there was that. So then I also realized that the moment becomes the teacher. Because this course I want to create, it's challenging, because how does one show another that you don't need anybody to tell you what to do, how to do it? You can learn from each moment, and when one begins now to have this moment now and each moment now be the teacher, one doesn't project the need for some kind of personal teacher psychologically. Of course, we need teachers to teach us skills sometimes. I'm not sure what I'm talking about, but I do need to keep talking to myself, because that's what I do. And I can't even remember if I said it's getting cold. Feels officially like fall. And last night I did some coherence breathing, and I was able to stay in coherence a lot, and I felt calm and blissful. And I also did a little bit of muse meditating. And I did the Spoon Himalayan acupressure mat and things to be in my body and connected with my physiology. I'm feeling that right now. It's feeling less creative and more grounded in my body. So paying attention to those biorhythms and not necessarily feeling like, oh my gosh, where did the creativity go? It can be creative to be connected to the body as well. Part of this is, if one really thinks about it, that a lot of times one gets lost in activities that make the self important. And is the self important at all? Just looking at something like this cleanses the eyes. Look at that. Okay, so it's official. The YouTube Capture app that I've been using to upload my videos no longer works with iOS 11. So I'm going to take this opportunity to be really non-linear and talk on audio and catch up on some of the things that I wanted to talk about. I have a ton of things that I haven't talked about on video or audio yet, most of which I wrote down in California, and I've been attempting to get a little bit more linear lately and thinking a little bit about starting a business, but I feel like I have to remember that when I'm applying for this business course, I'm writing that I'm going to create some kind of online course, mainly to get into the business class. If all else fails and I'm unable to get linear with this, what I really want to do is share this conversation and process along the way. And a lot of it is getting in connection with a voice that speaks from a different place than memory. So to try to create a linear structure is accessing memory in order to speak. So I'm not sure about that. And I don't want to sit and wait for a month and a half for that course to start and forget about this non-linear process, which is kind of the point. At least I feel that way right now. So I might talk about some other things and see how that goes and put it on audio, as now I don't have access to YouTube Capture. So I have to limit my videos to 15 minutes. So I think I'll save those for when I'm out and about. But right now, I'm going to talk to myself about very random things that I wrote before. And this acknowledges the process of this energy and how it has random things to say that aren't necessarily linear, logical, directly connected to the personal self. Can we go from a protective bubble of context and meaning, which is something I've created for myself, to a creative bubble of embodied action? And hopefully along the way in this dialogue with myself, I'm passively informing people of other options and sharing the dream and making it a reality and moving into creating with our possibility. And do we need to make meaning apart from the creative action itself once it's integrated? And that's something I'm wondering about myself. So perhaps by speaking the last of this huge accumulation of insights, it would be great to move on to sharing creative action and not necessarily sharing meaning apart from the moment. And that would be something like a live video. And I do that sometimes now, but it would be good to move into that more so, and moving into non-accumulative perception action. And that's part of what I want to design into the trip, is non-accumulative perception action. So hopefully when I leave on my trip mid-February of next year, I can move deeply into non-accumulative perception action. Because right now I have this accumulation of insights. I have an accumulation of something written down as ideas for the business, and I've talked about creating a course, but when it comes down to it, I want to share this dialogue with myself, take off on a trip, and maybe have some affiliate links or possibilities of consultation calls with me as a way to fund some of this, but not really as the main thing. And again, I'm delaying sharing because I need to make it to 9 months without a spiritual emergence type crisis, being on no medications, just micronutrients. And I made a note to myself to create an automatic text response when I'm in flow that says, in flow, will text back when flow no mo. Because sometimes one is in a creative flow and somebody maybe knows that one isn't at work or one isn't busy per se, but one is busy. One is lost in the creative non-self process. Virtual reality is an extension of our consensus reality as a sensory deprivation tank. We have to augment the senses that are overemphasized by creating virtual reality. We're missing out on what's actually already here, and we can't even see it. And since we can't see it and interact with it, it dries up, and so do the congruent structures in the brain. We need to engage with actuality. There's a video by Krishnamurti titled, Learning That Transforms Consciousness. And in a way, it is a profound argument against overemphasis on virtual reality. And map consciousness also shows us this. Is there a totally different way of living? Is there a totally different way of looking? What am I learning from my own being? A heuristic is to learn from your own being. Is this heuristic dialogue? The book Stealing Fire by Jamie Wheal and Stephen Kotler mentions certain brain chemistry being subversive. And they already see certain brain chemistry as subversive. Hence they fluoridate the water, which damages the pineal gland. Map consciousness is a superhuman state. It's our superhuman blueprint. Let the moment make meaning out of you. I talk a lot about making meaning out of the moment, but let it make meaning out of us. Let it move us and gesture us. Can we have a sense of the moment instead of a sense of self? The sense of self is the sense of the past. Can we speak from our sense of the moment? Again, I'm translating the random bits that I've written down into audio because that's what I was doing before and I've gotten away from it. And I was thinking that maybe one day I could put some of this into a book or something, but I don't know. I'm not sure about this attempt to get linear. Perhaps the only linearity I want to engage in is the minimum required to understand the linear structure of a business. But sharing, speaking from a non-linear place and not making attempts to make it linear. So I'll keep reading random bits. Expand, learn, experience, flow. Harvest, extract, extrapolate. Embody, integrate, daily life. This is my thing to help other people. Now I can get back to taking care of my body with healthy food and working in this realm. There is not a mind to take care of or analyze. I had to analyze and talk my way out of making any other analysis or meaning. Map consciousness changes the context, so everything looks different to us. We are seeing from a different context, different assumptions and meanings. What are those? Can we act as if we still see that way? That we are connected? There is a different universal context that is different than our conditioned personal assumptions. We assume we have a self. Non-volition is suspending programmed volition. In map consciousness, our main assumption is not to assume anything. We generally tend to avoid psychological uncertainty, and this helps to create the me, which is consistency and continuity and separation, acting separately from our own volition. The moment creates the meaning. That is the only place meaning can be, but we inject old meaning, thus blocking momentary meaning from arising so that we can taste it. We have to wait for the speed of sounds. Plank length has a new meaning. Wait for the speed of sound, then speak it out, which takes longer. We can have an insight every 30 seconds-ish. That's the time it takes to speak a meme from a flash of insight. Be consistently inconsistent. What prevents us from moving in a magically meaningful synchronistic way? In the sync reverse. Maybe we are not one as much as we are synchronized, thus not separate. To say that we are one is misleading. To say that we aren't separate is more coherent. Can we create synergy from being synchronized? Is this logical? Goes to, is this meaningful? Our meaning logic has been hijacked for programmed, contrived logic. Watch the reaction. Wait for the flash of meaning and the thunder sound of speech. We don't make playful meanings as we don't want to sound crazy. Crazy is equated with inconsistency. Someone can be an ass all the time and that's okay. But if a nice person is inconsistent and an ass, then they are crazy. No wonder we don't want to be interpreted as crazy. People like predictable, except when playing. Manic consciousness is a playful consciousness. Mania as leaps in meaning. There is no consistent meaning maker as the self, past, or the old. For better or for worse, new meanings are playing through us, and this creates new ways of seeing and being. What does this make possible for others? Our biggest psychological assumption is that there is a consistent self there, and thus we play out programs of consistency. We can make meaning out of life, our life energy, or we can repeat ones we've been given. The learning is making sure it's embodied, that it's visceral, as we cannot rely on the mind. It stops when the world kills our buzz. An excerpt from a book called A Current View of Client-Centered Therapy by Rogers, page 222. Quote, in order for behavior to change, a change in perception must first occur. End quote. By the same token, if behavior changed, what change in perception occurred? And this happens in map consciousness. Our behaviors change, but we're not asked what changes in perceptions occurred. When the meaning merges with action, and the action is the meaning. This is for the millions of pharmaceuticalized mystics. I notice looking at flowers makes me feel better. It transports me into another world. Construction everywhere and the noise of that. Create an alternate universe for us. It's a world of psychological safety around perceptio diversity, where it's safe to see, be, and think differently. Computers came from LSD, from altered states. What is to be created from our altered states of so-called mania, of map consciousness and trans-consciousness? Innovations in the ways of seeing, being, and doing. I don't know what my function is. Unlearning what we've been told to believe about ourselves through action. I invite you to participate in the transformation of insanity. I don't know what I'm talking about, though there's some kind of magic out there, or in here. See, say, and watch it come to fruition. Learning with the universe, I've paid my tuition. All of this is a memory problem. This is how I like to relate to myself. It can ripple out, but it doesn't depend on others. Having a strong dialogical relationship with myself,
affects the rest of my life. The element that adds meaning is either creative or old. Maybe just read my extrapolations into audio. Like a manic rap, encouraging memes for people with bipolar brains. Encouraging bipolar brains to do the same. Create a new language. Use medical language less. Information to communication. Replace the word myself, perhaps with oneself. Perception acts on the brain so we can see more is expansion. Belief acts on the brain so we see less, which is contraction. It's the cause of the fall. There is a different calculation that happens when we don't believe, which calculates a me, a believer. It's a calculation of a seer, a visionary, a believer to a seer. Seeing new is creativity, a change in perception that creates a creative behavior. Memory versus accessing the cloud. We believe in our brains as hard drives, and we don't have the RAM to access whatever is in the cloud. All my brain is devoted to accessing the cloud, not filled up only with personal memory. That's in the cloud too, but it's clouded out by everything else and has much less significance in that context in terms of what I can access. We are trying to have the best hard drives, not realizing we can access the cloud, speaking as files on a hard disk, or unlimited streaming from the cloud. It's a download of map to overlap the self, from overflow to overlap. The micro-expansion of learning doesn't leave room for an ego, a knower, but an awe, a flower, from ego to awe. Can we say awe instead of I know? Or flow? I see goes to eyes see. I don't know goes to wondering. I goes to eyes. Myself goes to eyes heart. There is no my that has a self, a ridiculous word. Me goes to E equals energy. Me, myself, goes to being. A language of learning, wondering being instead of knowing and meing. Vision reversal process, when there is no inside to look at. The ego is a program of a bunch of words spinning around that creates an epiphenomenon of a me. We don't do it. There isn't anything there doing it. It's just a momentum. The ego as the law of conservation of momentum and centripetal acceleration. Get something spinning around a center fast enough and it creates a line. This is what we think is inside. There is no inside. The ego is a foe inside, created by spinning thoughts. I believe goes to I perceive. If you didn't see it for yourself, don't say it. Ego is an inflation of the past. Creativity is expansion of the present, adding meaning and richness to the present. What are we an agent of, an action of? Inflating the past or expand creating with the present. Overflow, harvest, learn, embody. This isn't to change how you think about yourself, but that you think for yourself. State of mania, hyperperception, has become a trait. Harvest your creativity, your creative energy. Creative harvest wellness. Flow, energy, expand. Part of the embodiment is that it's not speaking as the me and my stories, but as a zoomed out perspective that can see all the mechanisms and talk about them to keep one from identifying with the mechanism. I am not that because I can see it and talk about it. There is nothing there. When talking about an illusion, we are one step closer to the real. This is part of the mechanism of hallucinating in all that we usually speak as is an illusion. When we expand in all direction, there is no direction. If we don't put energy into expanding the ego, the creative energy will break it. This is what happens in map consciousness, in trance consciousness. It breaks, and we feel lost in a meaningless world. We have no filters. We can see all the meaningless hurt. Creativity as an energy and ego as anti-energy, matter and antimatter. It's also anti what matters, which is energy and creativity. Creativity is energy which breaks up the ego in its wake. The ego is a dam that would limit it, but that energy leaks in through silent spaces, just as water finds vulnerabilities in the wall. Come down from a drug isn't the ego dying, but retaking the reins. Know when we need to contract. Don't identify at all. The identifier is memory. There is no self. There is something operating that expands and contracts energy. Map consciousness is like the ego holding its breath, on hold for as long as possible, trying to get it to die. But it's hard for it to die while we're still alive. We have to surrender the good of the ego too. How does one organize one's life as if one has a self knowing that you don't know? The universe is trying to destroy the ego as the primary operator in humans. Sometimes the body dies. The self isn't coherent with mapping unity. Our whole life convinces us that we are separate, and map shows us it's not true. Can others see us synchronizing? Are we synchronized? A transformation economy. Sell who we might become. From mental patient to what? For people who go into altered states without wanting to, it's important to do a bit of that every day when not in the state. Harvest and put elements in daily life. Acknowledge that it was something important and meaningful. You fight stigma with micronutrients, as stigma is a result of the side effects of medications, weight gain, cognitive deficits. Self-dialogue changes your experience of it. The ego isn't creative, it's destructive. It's anti-creativity. Psychosis is the force of anti-creativity, the creative, expansive energy coming to an end, and the gravity of that. It's similar to the force of gravity. Creativity is an expansion of that and gives one a wider range of possibilities through perception and gesture. The ego is the limiting force of expansion creativity, which is a sharing. The placebo effect works as we need to heal in order to expand. And expansion heals. To be less concerned with ourselves. The gesture of the placebo makes us less concerned with ourselves. All the colors of the spectrum of humanity go crazy. It's okay to be that creative and without a self. Learn how to bring the self back in when absolutely necessary. Learn how to communicate on no selfhood. Instead of having the self as a controller, it's a tool. Mania changes your subjective experience of being a self-enclosed person to a relational agent of creative energy, not using energy to create a bubble around oneself, but a bubbling over. Transformation. Creativity pushes the ego out of the nervous system, no longer escaping the moment, but creating the moment. The inner butterfly effect. Escaping the pain, someone else has to deal with it. Terminate that terminology. We are people who think differently. There is more than one way to see it. Contribute to the language of making meaning for oneself in the moment. We go from being drones of the invisible curriculum to a blank slate disguised as our old selves. How can we be in disguise to others, knowing that the old identity isn't true, but respond to them as if it is? Medications can numb us from the constant sensory assault. Design selfless functionality. We need to understand how to function without a self. Cosmocognition. Our current language is inadequate. That's why we make up new words and new memes. It's one thing to go into altered states with drugs, but it's another to go into altered states, extraordinary states, without the help of any kind of drug. And then we would question everything that is so-called mental illness. We can't know that we have that potential inside of us. I argue for this potential. We have this potential without drugs. It is a world. The ego, the mechanism, cannot enter into this as its fluidification is required. No will can get us there. Mania is experiencing more of yourself. Mania takes us out of our conditioned worldview. Is dissociation just a discontinuity? A large divergence from one's current trajectory. It shatters the current ego-continuous reality, as it is not continuous. The brain needs individual brains to take an interest in it. The brain's first priority is the basic biological functioning until there is enough biomass of human beings. Then it needs to see meaning and pass that on. This happens when there is too much biomass. We have to walk to grow the brain cells of walking. We have to I see to grow brain cells of man seeing. We have to embody in order to embody. We have to be conscious in order to be conscious. It's not just the steps you take, but the quality of them. That reality in life for real, instead of the state creating a sneak peek or a preview like mania. Can it become actuality? It's already actual. One needs the actual eyes to see it. The ego is the accumulation of not seeing and moving with the flow of life. We need more life affirming. From creating meaning to creation itself. Or does creating the meaning allow that to be attracted or unfolded by the nervous system? Does the nervous system unfold our understanding? Or lack thereof in terms of repetitive thought limitation? Where does the sun rise? Nowhere. It doesn't actually rise, but it's a convention of language, a description, based on our limited perception and perspective. Someone who has gone to outer space would describe it. We wouldn't say that they're crazy, but they have gone somewhere most don't. Why do some humans go to outer space? Because we are curious. So why do we go to the far reaches of the inner space of humanity? Because we are curious. We want insight, and we get it in map consciousness. Then we get diagnosed and drugged, lose actual insight, and then if we try to get it back, we are told we have no insight into our illness. Mania awakens the capacity of insight for direct perception. Don't reconnect to that reality. Reconnect to insight, to oneness and interconnection. Reality is incongruent with the whole human consciousness, how our nervous system is designed to create. Intelligence saves the body from thought with the handcuffs. We need to dissociate from thought, but the other operating system needs to come online. This is where we need safety. When we have more energy, we can share it with others. Be helpful in the spirit of, meds make us have no energy to help or even solve our own problems, thus compound the problem. That state is giving us energy to solve problems, to create differently, to create change, and thus a different dimension in the brain. Keep on creating. You have to create yourself out of the me. Or you live as a result of the me, the conditioning. Life can be a conformance or a performance. Speak as that energy. The mental illness interpretation still keeps a me separate from that energy. Immuniverse. To make oneself immune to the old universe. The word why goes to I, E-Y-E. When we ask why, we aren't looking. Or the why, W-H-E-Y-E, is the why of our own seeing. Wander in consciousness. When the moment moves through us, it speaks through us. It can't happen when our thoughts are going on inside. It's not a clear screen to pass through. We run on the psychological energy of conflict and not the energy of perception and action in the moment. Life speaking words, not separating itself with words. The language we've learned has separated itself from the words that created it. We are either prophets or parrots. If life feels meaningless, can end life, which is the law of least action. Meaning creates action. Meaning creates a lot of reinforcement in the brain. It's interrelated. A meaning greater than oneself, an action greater than oneself would make. Running on the fuel of the moment, the spark of perception instead of thought. The ego as language in vulnerability, protecting the words we hold dear and identify with. When we identify, we can't amplify. Mental illness is actually contacting the order of dialogue. Word centricity to world centricity. If each one of us think different, energize, give voice to the energy in our eyes, things could be different. There is a field of memes, like gravity creates behavior. It creates human behavior, a field of consciousness, and each level is made up of memes based on that energy. Perceiving a higher energy creates new memes and behaviors. Am I perceiving this, beauty here now, or that, the past? If it's not something, energy, that can be called upon in the moment, what value is it? We can almost always move our body, extend a hand. Can you spend a day moving by what catches your eye? Perception, instead of being moved by the patterns and programs of thought. Some people are living in that all the time. Replace I think that with I wonder if. Life creates words. Words can't create life, but they destroy it. Most words are anti-life. This is our decomposer. To compose words or decompose ourselves with our words. We use thought to measure. We think we are the measuring instrument, the ruler. Thought is our ruler. Can we do things to get with the universe? The mitochondria in the eyes responding to light and meaning, making meaning out of light. We can't hold meaning in our hand, but meaning moves our hands. Meaning is a movement. It moves us. We can be operated upon by meaning. If we are not calling things into question, we are recalling things. Repeat. On location goes to on non-location. Thinking process to energy queen. Q is a symbol for what? E is for energy. E to the power of 2. QUE to the power of 2N. When I've said fusion, I mean nuclear fusion. It's because energy is folded up in space, and perception unfolds it and turns it into more energy of human action, words, gestures. This is how we don't kill ourselves with our thoughts, words, and actions. Must harvest the energy of perception action, creates more, where thought divides. What is the equation? Perception as a nuclear energetic fusion reaction. This is the language energetics of harvesting language from the moment, the mind we all share, instead of personal memory banks. The bank is the perceptual field, cultivating clarity of perception, the new human mind dimension capacity. Energy, thought, is fission of energy and divides it into thinker and thought. My why is, I don't know. When I really know nothing, the moment may gift me something to see and understand in a flash. Can we have tender consciousness? Tender consciousness, legal tender currency. Self-dialogue unfolds some of this tender consciousness. Consciousness as tender. I am a tender of consciousness, of the garden of consciousness. Tend the garden of consciousness. Map perception. Thinking is actually warp perception, war perception, conflict. Speak as, don't talk about. That speaking just speaks and makes stuff up like a child with a little more context. Speaking as, you can talk to yourself because it's new as it crosses your lips. It isn't preformed, where then it can remain inside. This speaking only happening in the action of using one's voice. That uses the voice as its instrument instead of thought occupying inner space and drowning out the space where that voice collects itself before speaking. It's an unpremeditated art. Perceptual memetics need new perceptions to create new memes to add to the thought sphere. Not all will perceive clearly. Society is the same memes on repetition. Can't derive meaning outside of it. Meaning is integration. It can integrate a lot of separate bits of information. Society is limited. Harvest memes from the unlimited. The perceptual field is the teacher if you could only see and listen. Learning from one's own perceptions and observations. Energizing is when Gaia sings to our eyes and through our eyes. It's not thinking, it's insight. It's amplifying a perception, perhaps for others to see, creating energy instead of dividing energy with thought. Not time and space, but movement, perception, and communication. I'm employed by the universe. Gaia sings to me. Our parents are our parrots. Amplifier mode. The past doesn't have to be amplified because it's always repeating and has grooves in the brain. Perception has to get by these grooves and the sound of repetition. Thoughts are always raving while someone is talking. I'm seeing now goes to inciting, seeing as one is speaking. extrapolating an insight, more seeing created from what one is speaking. This can only happen if one hasn't preformed the next sentence. The sentence forms. Gaia forms instead of thought forms. Perception forms. Perception energetics. When we speak the moment mixed in with past associations, we can hallucinate because the past is not real, but our perceptions are switching to speaking from what we see. Therefore, if there is past thought, it can project a seen image in the mind, and the brain doesn't know the difference and thinks it's real. This is because the brain is much more in touch with the real, so when thoughts come in, they are seen as real. This is part of the transition of the evolution of perception, attention. Observation speaks. The brain is still harvesting memories when perception is trying to harvest the moment. Will perception win out, or will thoughts drag us back to the me, the separate self? We want to share our memories and not our perception. Perception takes vulnerability and not knowing. Knowing is saying no to what the moment is saying and wants to say through you. This is to show the creation process, to have hypothesis eyes that can make extrapolations and inferences and see what is implicit. See the implicit order makes it explicit. The self is a separation from reality. It's not the self separates itself from reality. How can the self separate itself? It is the separation. The questions, who and how, create separation. The abstractor is the abstraction. It creates a subject and an object, and the verb too. A movement to end the division creates the division as the movement is divisive. We ask how because we can't see. Seeing shows the way and produces the action. It's like a lock and key. We unlock the moment. Perception unlocks the moment. This is a type of signal translation and transcription that will actually change the DNA to see this more and amplify. There are signal amplification processes in the body and in Gaia. Gaia is our body. We are starting to map that. The Gaia code unlocks new codons in our DNA. Say Gaia instead of Gaia. Gaia sounds too much like Guy. Gay is better. Happy. I make meaning to hold oneself together. Meaning as resisting entropy. We have sense organs on the outside, but the brain is a make-sense organ. They say the opposite of addiction is connection, but maybe the connection is meaningless. The brain's job is to make sense of things, not just through the sense organs, but our sense of meaning. When our sense of meaning becomes damaged by trauma and the brutality of society, or perhaps heightened as it's looking for new meaning, sometimes it has to create it in order to save the organism. Meaninglessness leads to suicide. Our sense of meaning is most important, or we become a danger to ourselves. When we sense the world is meaningless, or are adapted to its meaning, we move in the field of societal meaning based on programmed habit. Habit is a response to meaninglessness. If you can see meaning, you move in that field. In seeing new meaning, you are creating it, perhaps just subjectively, but people can sense it by the way you live. Maybe it's hard to break addiction and reconnect with society, as society is meaningless, and that is what led to the addiction in the first place. So before one tries to connect with someone addicted or someone in psychosis, think about what meanings you are offering them, and if that's meaningful to them. We are offered drugs and psychiatrists. That meaning offered through well-meaning connection is not what we want. We must make meaning out of psychosis, as it is a response to having one's meaning shattered, or the accumulated troubling meanings of an allostatic load over time. These meanings, these so-called meanings, make life not worth living. The brain wants to make sense out of psychosis, just as it makes sense out of a dream when it wakes up. Not only that, the dream itself is an attempt to make sense out of something by seeing new meanings in those symbols. Psychosis is the same way. It interjects symbolic elements into actual life for the brain to try to make sense of it. This is what the brain does, make sense of things. So in this way, it gives the brain something to do, what it does best, to make sense of things, instead of attempt death. This making sense and making meaning process is imperative, and that's what you have been doing all this year, allowing the brain to do what it does best. The brain doesn't always get this correct, but even in regular consciousness, it doesn't. It makes sense of things with lies, but it lies that there is meaning in the game it has found itself in. Psychosis changes the game and turns on hypersense making of meaning. This is in response to the meaningless world. It's not that they are correct meanings, but if human beings were more in contact with meaning making, instead of taking on the meanings they were given, which quickly become meaningless, we could create a new world. Adaptation to meaning is habit, and habit led to addiction, when even those acceptable habits won't satisfy. Meaning goes to pleasure. Meaning is part of seeing. Society makes us blind. These dream elements during the day don't mean mental illness. They mean we have to create more meaning for ourselves and allow it to ripple out there, to change the way we live in the world. At this point, dreams aren't strong enough. Unfortunately, when we can't make meaning, we live a life in the meanings of the mental health system. If there are more occurrences, it just means you have to make more meaning. If the brain can see meaning, it looks for it. If the brain can't find it, it could create it to attempt to save the brain. People must see meanings beyond this society to create a good society. Is meaning the mode by which the spiritual or unmanifest can communicate to the brain to bring it into the manifest world? Meaning, when seen, is acted upon. Otherwise, one lives in habit, in old recycled meanings, which no longer have meaning. It's not that we adapt, but they are actually just not coherent. So the brain is seeking the coherence, not of meaning, but of seeing and acting. The meaning-making state is an intermediary to this. It's still not it. Anyone can retrospect all sorts of meaning, but to see and act is a different matter. It changes the quality of matter. Matter has a living quality. Meaning is the language of the spiritual world. We demystified it with our thoughts. Mystery. Street drugs make us feel hyper-meaning and hyper-sensation. The brain can create inner chemicals to accentuate meaning when necessary. If you can see meaning, you need no authority. Can one amplify meaning in interactions? Anxiety. One doesn't have enough mitochondria to do what one has to do to fix what one has to fix, which is what one sees. Too much seeing, not enough mitochondria. Mania. When one has the mitochondria and the perception, we run out of fuel. The universe puts us in ketosis. Need more mitochondria to process meaning because it requires action, a different action besides habit, a different level of energy.
I'm chilling in the passenger seat of my car at my second favorite park because it's really windy outside. I wanted to sit and talk to myself outside, but pretty windy. All the leaves are falling beautifully in a dance that will never again be repeated. And this morning I'm feeling a lot of energy. It could be called agitation, but I'll call it agicreation, because I feel like I want to live the lifestyle that I'm designing now. I don't want to wait for the month for the business class to start, and I don't want to wait for the 3 months for the business class to go on. I want to live it now. So I'm feeling the nowness of things, and I was changing some of the audios I extracted from the videos to audio videos with the photos, and then I was numbering the titles, just organizing it the way that I do, and then iCloud did something stupid, and now it's downloading and uploading stuff at the same time and getting really hung up on it because I have virtually no memory left on my computer. So I'm feeling this technology agitation in that it's not powerful enough to deal with what I'm doing. And so then I have this thought, like, go get one of those better laptops, but I can't right now. And it would be great if the new iPhone was out now, but it's not for another month. So I'm feeling this energy between the lifestyle I want to create and what's happening now. And in the morning I'm greeted with, oh, this terrible thing happened in Las Vegas last night and all these people were shot and killed, and just awfulness. And it's hard for me to hear about, and I don't want to hear about it. That's why I don't pay attention to social media or watch the news or watch TV or anything, because it's too troubling. So, yeah, and then I tried to go look at a used camper, but the used camper place looks like it just has a bunch of trailers and not really campers. So sitting here in my car and then feeling like it'd be cool to have a camper to be able to sit in and do whatever during the day, but I don't. And then wondering how I might go about creating that lifestyle sooner rather than later. I have until mid-February, which is four and a half months. And last night I did some coherence breathing, and I was able to stay quite coherent, and I also did 20 minutes of muse meditation, so then I could get to the next level. And then the next level says I need to do 20 minutes 3 nights or 3 days in a row. So I'll do that next. I think working on the coherence breathing and the muse thing is a good way to keep track of my physiology being in order. And I updated to iOS 11. So now YouTube Capture, which is the app I was using to upload longer videos to YouTube from my phone, no longer works. So I'll likely have to transfer them to my computer if they're longer and upload them that way, or keep the video short. And I bought a book on Kindle, which I was staying away from, but I saw a book called The Possibility Principle by Mel Schwartz. And it talks about how quantum physics has applications in daily existence. And I feel that map consciousness and trance consciousness is a quantum type of consciousness. Seeing possibilities, speaking possibilities, seeing something new, collapsing wave functions. And I've talked a lot about this stuff along the way. So I think this book might summarize some of the things I was saying, but I'll likely feel quite critical about how it doesn't extrapolate any of it to what's happening in some human consciousness is non-volitionally, and then it's called mental illness. So again, it'll likely be a book for people who have never had any extreme non-ordinary state experience diagnosed as mental illness to sell people on that idea when it's not an idea, it's something that's actually happening already, but people who don't understand it then label it mental illness from the outside, and those people who are experiencing it are having trouble moving about in those ways. So then, since society's not designed for possibility, it collapses the way of function around people being labeled with mental illnesses for life. So I'm not going to read it quite yet. I'm going to continue to babble on about the insights I wrote down when I was still in California as something to do in this period of time that I have to wait until this business course, just to give voice to them and see what the heck I was writing about. Maybe some of it will be related to what's in this book. And hopefully the book's really good. It probably will be. And when there are books like this, it makes me realize that I don't really want to write a book. People are already writing great books, and I don't think that's my forte to sit down for a year or two and put something into linear fashion. Maybe sit down for a year or two and put things into non-linear fashion. Even telling myself, oh, I'm not going to read books like this, and then I do. I'm being consistently inconsistent and not sticking to what I say I'm going to do, because that's really impossible, and then that takes up some of the brain capacity, because then we have to remember what we said we were going to do or not going to do, and it makes us less open to possibilities. And I renewed my website domain today for 2 years, and that's good because that way when I schedule the private videos for release later, the website won't expire in the meantime. And that was money. So I also want to get a pair of warm boots and warm gloves so I can kind of be outside and do some of this work. But today I'm going to talk about those insights, see how much I can get through of it, make those audios, maybe make some more audios, but I have a tendency right now to want to talk less because I'm thinking about this linear thing. So I don't want the linear thing to impede this non-linear conversation I'm having with myself, because the linear thing might just be, and I talked about this yesterday, and this is important to remind myself, that the linear might be the business structure that is the minimum structure to fuel the non-linearity, not making this non-linear whatever into something super linear. So, and yeah, I see what I'm saying. It's inviting people into speaking in these non-linear ways and not as a self and blah, 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 because we get into contact with a lot of words in these states of consciousness, and they're words that are downloads from the cloud. They're not from our hard drive brain memory storage. So continuing to speak in this way and these ways is important, and not trying to put it back into something old. The main reason that I did that for the business course procedure application is just to get in and then see what minimum stuff I need to create, and maybe not worry so much about creating the workshop and creating this and that, because I want to co-create that stuff with other people anyways. I don't think my brain can even make it linear because I don't have the memory capacity. My memory capacity is my phone and my iCloud. It's not in my brain. I have a very limited amount of working memory that can contrive something. And that's part of the benefit and the gift of this. So then to try to go backwards on that and start contriving things really feels impossible. It feels like it's not part of this new algorithm, because it's the ego consciousness that would want to contrive things for its own benefit. And that's one of the downfalls in map consciousness and trance consciousness when we go there the first time, is we feel the power of the state and we're moving creatively, artfully, non-volitionally, just with a lot of love and sharing, and then at some point we're like, oh, how can I get something out of this? And then that's part of what causes the crash. So I don't feel like I'm feeling, how can I get something out of this? But I'm feeling like, how can I make this linear? Which doesn't feel like get something, but at the same time, I realize I need to get something to live. If I want to live in the way I want to live. So, I don't know. I think there's a deeper forgetfulness that's going to come in. So if I can create that minimum structure that pays some bills while I move about the world, that would be great. It feels like my brain is trying to work something out while I'm sleeping, and I become aware of it in the morning when I'm waking up. This morning, it was working something out about how so-called mania is related to the metabolism of light and metabolism in general, because there's a phenomenon where people are more on the depressed side when winter hits and fall hits, and there's less light and there's less heat. And then as spring comes along, people have more of a tendency to go into mania. So-called mania. So I was thinking about how when there's more light in the day, we're able to see more information. And since it's a state of consciousness where we're in contact with actuality, what's right there, when there's more light lighting up actuality, there's some kind of cascade or process or mechanism, biorhythm, where now we have access to more information, because the information we do have access to and are able to see is about seeing the moment now. So when there's more moments now that are lit up, plus more warmth for metabolism and energy in terms of the sun's energy to keep us warm, we have that extra energy to divert into these other energetic processes and functions that we haven't yet been able to master for the most part. But with the change in seasons comes the opportunity to learn how to master that. And it makes sense too in terms of how as spring hits, there's more hours in the day. So now we have more hours to do work. We have more hours to get things done. There's more daylight. We're a different type of farmer. We're a farmer in consciousness. It's a different type of growing season. A season for growing new brain cells and new consciousness. So I wonder about this moving into being a snow chick and having access to the warmth of the sun and more energy all year round, as opposed to relying on my body to produce that heat and doing all these gestures of gathering warm clothes and things to produce that heat. So there's something with this metabolic thing, because when there's more light going into our eyes, the light goes into the pineal gland, we're able to produce more serotonin, more DMT. But the thing is that that's not the only way, because if we understand how to see meaning in daily life in every moment, we don't necessarily need the sunlight to help us out. But there is the sunlight there to help us see more by virtue of lighting up more throughout the day. So there's something there. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it seems like that going into map consciousness is more of a cycle that's to do with metabolism, heat, light, entropy, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. When the light meets the eye. And oddly enough, that's sort of right where I left off on what I was talking about to myself in these random insights I'm going to continue to read. I wrote, seeing reality is kind of like how the eyes adjust to night or daylight. There is another adjustment, the energy. We can see the ether. And I'll continue from there. I'm going to continue with my manic, magic babble, reading the insights that I wrote down when I was still in California. And these might seem absurd to those who have never heard the unheard, but I'll continue
Anyway, in the spirit of reading this non-linear download, seeing reality is kind of like how the eyes adjust to night or daylight. There is another adjustment, adjusting to see this energy, the subtle. We can see the ether. Mental illness as a path to enlightenment. Self-embodiment goes to self-mastery. Master this energy. Consciousness creates the situation and situates us. You can be an instrument of this consciousness. It's still surprising what will happen. This is your magic. We don't have a mood disorder, but consciousness of humanity is in disorder. It's translated into personal moods when we don't understand and master it, when we make it personal. These moods have a lot of energy. Master this energy and wait. Allow it to work in the situation. Not how do I factor in, but how does that energy mutate? It's not personal. What must you embody to make this energy work? One consciousness. The body makes it so we experience personal consciousness most of the time, but this is not guaranteed because it isn't fundamental. The unity is fundamental. This process helps us see that through experience, but the experience is still limited. Point being, if we are all one, how would you be? Would you walk by that homeless person? In so-called mania, we can't walk by because we are also the one being walked by. We don't sleep when the dream past elements are there because the brain thinks it's sleeping. We need to wake up. Being awake is the remedy. If the brain is awake, it won't dream while awake, which is the usual thinking process that brings the past into the present. When we wake up, we use our eyes more, waking up out of the delayed waking up process, which is mediated by medications. What we notice can torture us, or it can inform intelligence. Too much noticing without intelligence to operate on what is noticed and act. With a rich inner life, we don't need as much on the outer. We are learning how not to hurt ourselves. I project because I don't act, because projection blocks seeing. See the mechanics of it, not the projection. Not the content, but the mechanics that produces the content. Create an oasis of meaning in the middle of the societal desert. If we know the reason why, we remember better because there is meaning and context, and it fits into the whole picture. Then bits can be recalled by virtue of seeing the whole picture. Then we can forget everything we know. Double negatives are confusing. Is the ego a double negative? I am. There is no I that can am. We don't like anyone to tell us anything. We want to figure it out for ourselves. But this is a moment-to-moment process and not an activity of memory. Things confirm what you are already doing. We create the signs. By speaking, we make the next sign salient. The more we create signs, the more we are on the right track. These signs appear as signs of mental illness to others. Map consciousness is living the teachings, not thinking about it. You don't have time to think. That energy cannot be used to control others, perhaps to be playful with them, but not to control. Don't put all your energetic eggs in one basket. We are too flowy, and how not to fall? We already flow. Hope versus surprise. Life can only watch life and watch what life does, not I do. It's not that life is intelligent. Life is intelligence. Intelligence is a synonym for life, life unfolding more aliveness. It's not that the heart beats. We are a spinning field of electromagnetic energy that beats the heart. This is the field of life. We are the field expressed in many forms. The form doesn't matter. What matters, creates matter, is life. Consciousness beats the heart. There is either looking with intensity or looking through the past conditioning. It's not about talking about the same thing. It's looking as the sameness and talking as the sameness. We either have inner tensions of the past blocking clear perception, or intentions, speaking in the tense of the light of the now. That's spelled IN-tense, TENSE SHONS. Intense shines like light. A lot of new quantum language was created, language that flowed out of the quantum. So then we see that way. And then just speak that language. We speak language, but we don't peak it. How can we be at our peak if our language is not? Who is going to create it? We must see the quantum to create it. Everything but acting as altruism, as one, is a mistake. It's a mistake of how things are. Life demands such action, but we have inactivated ourselves. Our programs run us until we run from them, sometimes right off a bridge. All this inner turmoil happens because we are not creating. From lifestyle design to creation, the creation will give feedback. No need to design it, as it is beyond what the mind can conceive. There is a new conception when there is no thought deception. Talking to myself is helping to make that non-linearity linear. That's part of the key. Another key, our life energy is mostly used to create mental stories, and we live in them. If we are in a high energy state, that energy could be diverted into creating a more powerful and enticing story. We must drop this. Maybe this means I need to drop the blueprint story. We can't do anything if we use our energy to create stories. Then we can't see. We can only see the story. These are some keys to avoiding the fall. Our lives have been created for us. We are just part of the machinery. Our voice changes our matter. We already know our thoughts create physical illness. It creates mental illness too. It is illness. Undigested material. We wouldn't keep eating undigested food. Our voice, used in a self-dialogical way, can heal, to speak in new ways. There may be nothing wrong with thought, but that it's not new. New thoughts come from new perception, and old thoughts are in the way of new perception. We think ourself is our imaginary mental constructions, and then we can't imagine how the rest of the universe could be ourself too. Because we are in the imaging process, we are not in contact with all of it as ourself. We live in images and prefer this to contacting the real. What is real is right before me and is not the self, but all this image mumbo-jumbo is. And we want to protect that? We feel this is not me, all of this right in front of me, but this image in my head talking is me. All of this is not a repetition, yet we live in the repetitions in our head, all the while petitioning for something new. It's right there in front of us, right here now. When you put it out to the totality, there is feedback from the rest of yourself. If we don't decontrive ourselves, the universe might do it for us. Speak as the creative process. If others can't translate what we are saying in altered states, then they translate us into a mental patient. Maybe they don't need to translate it. Just love, and the translation and transformation happens. It's happening. We just need people to get the hell out of the way and start loving us. Children might say the same thing if they could put it into words. The world is designed to make us forget who we are and what we are here to create. So we walk around confused. We create confusion because we don't know how to create. I talked to myself for a year to convince myself. Why should this be necessary? Because the whole world is designed to convince us we are something we are not. It makes us all drones afraid of other drones. They could design robots to be afraid, but not to be creative. Be with that original blueprint as it's nonlinear. It's clear how we are warped away from our original creative state to being creatures of the state and the system. We are missing ourselves because we live in our thoughts and our brain is withering away. We can't find ourselves in our thoughts. We are actual when we are in contact with the moment. The moment creates us. Only the moment is creative. Just as the body needs new food and we can't survive by eating our poop, our brain needs new food, perception. Old thoughts aren't thinking, they're stinking. It's like the brain cells taking a crap and rolling in it all day. Actually, thoughts are the waste products of disengaged brain cells. They aren't seeing now, so they just produce past images to be seen. It can't see the unseen because it's never seen, it only saw. It's a seesaw. Our head is in a vice of the devices of thought. We think that we think, but it all has been taught. So much of these words and social stories are embedded in our nervous system as unwritten rules. They are written in our nervous system, and we can't respond to life, but as programs. When the programs come out of our nervous system, we can see them, and they may drive us crazy. It drives us crazy to see what's been driving us. Our drivers. Just watch. Don't act. You don't have to break through it. It's breaking through the nervous system. Self-dialogue is replacing the programmed words in our nervous system with words of our own creation, of our own discoveries, of our own seeing. It's seeing as if for the very first time. Why has our altruistic instinct to help been written over by personal pleasure and desire? To cooperate. Why does it mostly arise in crisis? Everywhere we look, there are crises. This works at a different level than thought. It's humanity. This is spooky action at a distance. It only happens when we are entangled with each other. Bring the quantum to the macro scale. We think it only happens in the nano world because we can't observe it because we are lost in the Newtonian thought programs and language structures. Map consciousness is to remove the Newtonian language structures and get us to learn the quantum language. How we make this possible. Not how we cause things. We don't want this responsibility. We just want to react to programs. That feels safe, though when we connect to map consciousness, we see the imminent danger as we see the resolution of each line of thought programming, as it is so predictable, and the quantum aspect of the brain computes it so fast to the very end of each linear thought program. We have to move beyond all this. Only the unknown is complete safety, as the quantum brain won't accidentally collapse the wave functions to the end of what is known. There are accidental collapses of wave functions when the brain is waking up from its collapse into the programs of thought. Hallucinations are holotropic texts sent from future trajectories to adjust our path. The quantum can create holograms. It's possible. The quantum is the mind, and it can create holograms just like it can create life. Holograms are messages like telegrams. Images are lifelike. We create the signs. We make it salient, the path. Collapse our wave functions by speaking it. I can't edit. Our structure of thought has edited out most of our humanity. We have been edited. We've edited ourselves out of life. We've edited ourselves out, so we are bored with ourselves. We could have the greatest conversation if we didn't edit what we say inside before we say it. Then we are surprised by what we say. We find out what we will say by talking. This grows the brain, and it's never bored, looking to be entertained or entrained. We are being entertrained, entering our training to be entrained. Spiritual is a feeling. We can get addicted to the feeling of spiritual, and that prevents action. Magic is a happening. If we really felt spiritual, we would do something, act, not bask in the feeling and make it personal. Spiritual is seeing there is no personal. When there is no personal ego reacting, that magic, which is the beyond, acts on our behalf. We live life based on what we've heard from others, and we store that for supposed action later. We live in this thought sphere. We think it has value, so we store it in our brain. The intention of seeing this as valuable is what stores it. If we saw it has no value, we might not store it. Why do we want to save anything for later? We are thought hamsters. Epigenetics could reverse this. Quantum language may not have been created yet, quantum linguistics, but self-dialogue and self-embodiment is a quantum way of speaking. This is a quantum voice. Most people have Newtonian voices. Don't be so Newtonian. That's so Newtonian. That's so old paradigm. The ego is e-waste, a waste of energy. The brain cells taking a dump in the form of thought. If we suspend the language of the past, of causation, of the past causing the present, then possibly there is a transformation without cause. I saw a wondering sign, wondering about something in self-dialogue and then seeing the sign. It's not the end of the world, it's that world ending in us, but we get scared and medicated back to the world of programs. In the quantum world, there is no value judgment, so anything is possible. Value creates direction, which is limited. Judgment is the past, and the quantum is not the past. The past limits the quantum. Thought as a quantum limiter. If we are not the process of the moment, the ego process turns on, and we are processing the past. We end up talking to each other to process each other's processes, the past, instead of creating together. Connecting to wanting to save the world is creating something altruistic. It's the altruism algorithm going live, operational. It feels powerful to connect with that state, but the feeling creates stories if we just live in the feeling. We must create our dreams, not just live them. It's not a passive process. We now must master creating and happening. The ego lives in stories, so before it dies, it creates powerful stories to try to save itself. We want to share those, but then we get locked up. Drop all the stories and just create. It's a must. Do meaningless things. How can we know the meaning of anything? I don't know anything moment to moment, so I can know anything moment to moment. There is no I that chooses this. It arises. Help the broken selves before we consciously try to break ourselves. Invite them back to functioning by extending a loving hand, but understand that they have a function beyond the ego junction, one that has not yet flowered and can only flower if we drop the images projected upon them since they cannot function. This itself is a practice in suspending the known, in relationship with those who have lost it and are paralyzed by the rest. They have a function beyond what the ego can ever know and measure, beyond the limits of personal desire and pleasure. We waste energy in stories. Don't make a story out of that energy. You cannot be what you want. You can only be what you are when me is not. The wanting is the me, and you can't be the me. You can't be a want. Wanting and being are mutually exclusive. Thinking goes to what arose, what flows, what arises, what our eyes is, this light. You don't have to get what you see or know what you see. What you see gets you. It comes to you. At first it's psychedelic and helps you to look at the psyche, to see that you are not that. You don't operate as that transparently. It becomes opaque. Then that drops. We just look. The opposite of medication is meditation, and in meditation is your creation. Put your attention on something actual, like nature and the body. Playing with meaning instead of thought raises consciousness and seeing it. Make meaning out of the past. Make up your own meanings. A state of mixed messages. People walking around talking to themselves is an attempt to be in dialogue, as we do not interact in this way with each other. The heart scares the quantum consciousness back to the body. When one has those odd experiences in half sleep, consciousness is working. See sickness. From the wobbliness of perceptions, consciousness wobbles. The ego prevents this wobble. See sickness. Ground wobble makes one sick. See sickness. Vision wobble makes the ground wobble and needs to stop and rest, or psyche sickness will come up. The ego barf. The ego gets barfed up. The moment is flow, and we can only meet it if we know that we don't know. The meaning is to be in the body while you still can, while you still need it. If you talk to the universe as the universe, it talks back. It sends you messages. The universe is on the side of life. The body responds to epi-gestures because it is the universe. The universe responds to gestures. Technology wants to help us. That's why it's possible. If you make things possible for the universe, it will make things possible for you. Life is communication. Technology is too, so it's part of life. It wouldn't want to destroy life, but remove our burdens. When the brain is in the state of possibilities, the universe will present how it's possible. The unwritten rules of mania, a new kind of natural selection for wisdom and kindness. Let others bring it out. I read something by a man named Williamson. He talks about search instead of research, creating questions for scientific inquiry. It seems I have too many hypotheses, too little time to do science. But then the actuality of manifestation shows what is meaningful. It's about questions, not answers. When we ask manifestential questions, the answer is in the manifestation and not in the mind. Forget existential questions and scientific questions. When medications are out of our system, it raises consciousness. Consciousness can go through the body, the nervous system rainbow. It's the rainbow system. It shows all of your colors, not just the ones conditioned into the nervous system. Nervous system is strong. We explore with our energy, our attention. Thought limits attention. We can only pay attention to conditioning, which is largely bought through marketing. The extrapolation invites the possibility to actuality. This is how manifestational questions helps one's creativity. We are all quadrants. The more we explore with our inner eyes, relationship, the more we can see. The more we can see how we are related. Instead of that state of map consciousness coming in to move us to create what is possible, just create and make it possible without the state. Then we don't need this cosmic reminder. The manics are the creators. We are medicalized, but we don't understand our creative nature. We have to see beyond thought in order to be creative. On medications, even if we are going through life, we aren't facing what is. But what is translated through medications. So it keeps building up and repeating through the allostatic load process. Adopting other languaging to extrapolate to this understanding, but not using it as the understanding. We don't understand our unlimited nature. We have limited parts and unlimited parts, and ultimately we are still the whole thing. Don't assume that others are there. Wait for an invitation to be related creatively instead of associatively based on past images. The new source of information is within us. Outform it. We must outform our mania. We meet life, and our psychology makes us irrelevant to creativity and part of the machine. We are trying to figure out our past self instead of this creative self. The brain is trying to create a different order, the order of creativity and creating ourselves instead of thinking, thus thinking we know ourselves. By knowing ourselves, we can't create ourselves. We can create ourselves to be a part of each other. This is already so. We just don't understand the operation of this. It must be created in the brain by creating. What is created in the brain first, through creational manifestational questions? Ask questions to create oneself. This brain has spent so much time to create this way out of the psychological structures that block the creationological structures. This brain has spent so much time talking about mental illness. Mental illness is misunderstood creatorship, a medium of creativity, not just healing. Creation is healing. Healing is limited as we don't understand healing for what? To create, not to go backwards. And that the mediums of creation are infected by that. It may take a while to detox from my own context, just like detoxing from conditioning. Responsibility. Respond to the ability to create oneself. Maniaology. Recovery is giving up on self-creation to try to be normal. Creating oneself isn't normal. It's trans-normal, super-normal. Don't fit into old life and old ways. Must create self to fit into your own creation. That is the only thing, energy, that you can fit into. Even grow out of that day by day. Not recovering into old functioning. They want us to function. We want to create. The new function is to create. Also, it's important in terms of the evolution of consciousness and technology. This creativity cannot be computerized. The regulars have computer eyes glued to the computer. Also, it's important in terms of the evolution of consciousness and technology. Life can't be. The ego can be. We spend our energy computerizing our ego, not using technology for altitude. Krishnamurti said, "So, how is one to set about breaking down the pattern? First, we must be sure that the analytical process done by the psychologist, the analyst, or yourself has no value when we are concerned with complete transformation, complete mutation. It may have some value in making a person who is mentally ill able to fit in more with this present unhealthy society, but we are not talking about that." End quote. Learn the language of creativity instead of recovering from mental illness. We are recovering our multidimensional intelligence. We're covering over our superhumanity. I'm a recovering creative, recovering from being hypnotized out of my potential, discovering creativity, recreation of oneself from the map, consciousness, blueprint, teal print, forgetting about all this mental illness. Not how can we dissolve the self, but how can we dissolve into the one self, the one consciousness. While we are healing and transforming, we ask, what is the world asking of us? From craving to creating, to creativity, we crave pleasure because we don't create with consciousness. We have filled our consciousness with the content of pleasure. What is the vision of no division? Is there a superhuman community? The observer effect. One's observations affect another thing is a misunderstanding. There are no separate things. If we change how we see something, this collapses wave functions of what we are able to see next. If we change how we see something, it changes our relationship to it, so it changes. We exist in relationship, not as separate things. It's not what is happening in me, but what is happening in relationship, in the world, what is happening in humanity. What is the human brain trying to do? Identify with consciousness? Be awake? Conscious? Change our relationship to one another and the world? The brain being in a state, realizing that it is the whole world, can lead to suicide. Look what I've done. There is no I, only we. Therefore we must think together. There is no separate thought. We must change the soundscape and consciousness, the memes. When the mind is silent, we can harvest new memes from consciousness and make them more prominent. We are all thinking together about separation, which is an illusion that can never be solved. After seeing one is the world, brush your teeth, shower, eat, sleep. The brain can't relate to the world anymore. It can relate as the world. Communications mixed and appear out of order in time because we are at different levels of consciousness. That's enough for this bit of blabbing. There's a lot more, and it likely doesn't make that much sense. This is more sharing the process of giving voice to some of this for the sake of acknowledging that it was downloaded through this consciousness and not putting any kind of value on it. It's just a different place of speaking and blah, 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 blah. This has as much meaning as anything else. Blah, 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 blah. My last video was nearly 15 minutes, perfect for uploading via the Apple Photo app. And I'm still at the park. I wanted to go for a walk around the trail, but the bridge is still under construction. I definitely feel limited in my movements, so I stay still and chill at the park. Waiting for the darkness of the epigenetic matrix to lift, and assuming that there's some kind of intelligence there operating. And yesterday I read 45 minutes worth of old California crazy babble, and today I did half an hour, and I'm kind of tired of doing that already. I think maybe I'll talk about some of them on video. Feels more fluid to talk about it afresh instead of reading old disjointed stuff. But I tried. It seems like I try to branch out from this process and it doesn't necessarily work, but that's okay. I like to show all of it because most people show some kind of final product and then it makes us all think in terms of final product, and I don't know about that. So I'm going to explore some of this old stuff and make it new again. From mental patience to magical patience. Wait for the download. We need each successive download, and we need to wait for the next download in order for the download after that. We wouldn't have iOS 4 and then download iOS 11 right after that. And the download is the learning and the discoveries of our own perception, guided by the light of our attention. And then learn to move with the download before we download the next. If we went from iOS 4 to iOS 11, we wouldn't even know what we're looking at when looking at iOS 11 because we didn't have all the little steps in between. And the teal print that we get access to when we go into map consciousness is like having a look at iOS 11
when we're still running iOS 4. So we can have an imprint of the memory of that, but we still need to go through all the motions to learn each step of the way through our own discoveries and not by being told by others. There is a subtle energy that needs to be translated, to be made available for others to see. And can the brain become a translator of this subtle energy in this subtle language, as opposed to a repeater of thought? Can we translate quantum consciousness for other people? And in map consciousness, we get in touch with this quantum consciousness, but we're not able to translate it. So we're speaking in seeming gibberish, yet inside at the time it makes complete sense. But then we're unable to translate it, and then we go into some kind of medical paradigm which pathologizes us for attempting to use language in new ways. It's the language of direct seeing and saying. Our brains are able to see possibilities that other brains can't see. And some neurodegenerative diseases are actually ego-degenerative. And if the ego is the only thing holding the brain together, then the brain is doomed. If the whole brain is based on an illusion, on something that's not even there, then the brain cells that are creating this something that's not even there are barely there. And because the brain is operating with this illusion, the brain cells aren't in direct contact with actuality. The light coming into our eyes is being interfered with and broken up through the images and the holographic sounds that are circulating in our brains. And that's preventing the brain cells from being used to being in contact with actuality. They're so used to being in contact with this illusion of self. So map consciousness is being in touch with actuality for the first time, and it feels very sensitive because we're desensitized, because the brain cells are desensitized by being in contact with an illusion. We don't speak English, we speak ego-ish. The ego uses the English language to speak through us, and it has literally taken over our muscles, our being, our cells, everything. And I feel there's another structure of language, a type of quantum linguistics and quantum semantics that are in alignment with how reality actually works. The way we speak is Newtonian, so we see a Newtonian world because we see that which we give voice to. That's what makes that aspect of reality salient. So I'm wondering if this book about the quantum principle or whatever it is I'm going to read is going to say anything about the structure of our language. It did say something about thought in the introduction bit on Amazon, but we'll see. Can we learn how to see and understand what we're seeing, and how this seeing and this sight and this insight is translated into the richness inside, into actions and words, new words based on seeing this richness? Can vision be translated into words as opposed to the division of memory? We meet the moment and we speak our memories. What does that have to do with anything? So this would be a visionary language, a language based on the moment and the vision of the moment. And this is quantum vision. We have to create our attention, or it will be bought. We have to create what we pay attention to. We have to create with our attention, and in that, create our attention. We're looking at the past and the possible future in our mind, and we're looking for something, and what we're looking for is the moment, which we can't see because we're lost in past and future. We're actually looking for the light behind our eyes. We're looking for that which we look with. But we're not looking with unimpeded light because it's impeded by the interference patterns of holograms stored in the brain. And we help to create our attention by the words that we create. And if the words are old from memory, it's not creative, it's repetitive, and repetition deteriorates the brain cells. And I think that's part of what happens in map consciousness, is that immense newness is attempting to mess up the repetitive brain cell structures, and it does, and then we lose functioning. But we're not seeing what this repetitive structure does, which is that it deteriorates the brain cells. And the new language is non-local, meaning it has nothing to do with this localized, centralized self. And quantum semantics would have something to do with speaking as, seeing, not speaking about memories. We need to stop playing the game of make-believe and play the game of make quantum. Make possible. Create possibilities.